Some countries are more advanced than others, and some countries are more primitive than others. And I'm not talking about economic development here. If anything, it's a kind of socializing development, a civilizing development. And really a point comes in every society which grows up or wants to grow up, when they realize that the fundamental principles for which society is governed has to be based upon equality. And that is a fundamental principle. Principle of law, a principle of governing society, a principle of a fair and unbiased way in which you run your country. It says in the American Constitution, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They don't mean equal in ability, but they mean equal under the law. They mean that everyone is treated exactly the same. And that is an important principle. We discovered that, I think we could go back in the UK to 1215, at the time of the Magna Carta. And what made that such a fundamental principle was that it recognised, and this is a crucial point in any civilizing society, the crucial point that everybody is subject to the law equally. Everybody is the same, even the king. Even the king who is in charge of everything, he has to be subject to the law as well. And that is a fundamental turning point in any society. Before that, you have primitive societies where the king or the ruler or the despot or the dictator is in charge, and whatever he says goes, and he's not subject to any laws or rules at all. But the point comes in the development of a society when you get to that point where you realize that everybody has to be equal. And the law does that by bringing everybody under it. The law is the equalizing force within any country, and it's an important stage in progression from primitive to advanced countries. All men are created equal. I heard on the news yesterday that some VIPs from FIFA are going to be allowed to come into the country with regard to attending a football match or some Euros. And they're going to be allowed to come in on the basis that they don't have to obey the normal rules and regulations of quarantine that everybody else does. And that, I found, was a startling thing to hear. This country has always been based and proud of the fact that we have this advanced civilization of being able to treat everybody exactly the same. But this rule flies in the face of that principle and breaks it asunder. It means that now some people are subject to the rules and some people are not subject to the rules. It's at this point you realize that society is not as equal as you thought it was, or as equal as you thought it should be. It's at this point you begin to realize that there are people who are VIPs and there are people who are ordinary people. You begin to realize that there are people who are subject to the law and there are people who are not subject to the law. It's at this point you begin to realize that there are masters and there are serfs. And the masters can do with the law whatever they want to do with it, while the rest of us have to obey it. Now, if you break such a fundamental principle as that, you don't just allow VIPs in to attend a football match. You've done something far more fundamental and far more dangerous to your own society than you could ever imagine. It's at this point you begin to break the fundamental rules which allow everybody to be treated the same. It's at this point that people realize that they're not equal with others, that there are more important people. It's at this point you have one law for one group and another law for another group. And it's at this point you divide your society into two: the elite and the ordinary working person in society. Those to whom the laws apply and those to whom they don't apply. Those who can waive the rules and those who don't or can't waive the rules and have to obey them strictly and absolutely. It's very similar to what you might find in any typical totalitarian society. Communist societies of Russia and China have suffered from this particular problem in the past. We've always thought them rather primitive in that respect, that if you were a party member, you could do things and get away with things and have things which non-party members couldn't do. It was one rule for the rich, or one rule for the party, or one rule for the elite, and a different rule if you were just ordinary. Once you break this rule, though, you've broken society in two. You've made a fundamental change to the nature of your whole way of conducting yourselves. And you have flown in the face of this basic principle that all men are created equal. No longer is that the case. And no longer is it the case that you can call yourself an advanced society either. Once you allow even just mere VIPs of football character coming into your country and able to break the rules or bend the rules, oh yes, you might say, well, they've got certain restrictions. But still, they're not the same kind of restrictions that ordinary people might have to face. No matter how it's glossed over by those in power that this is just an ordinary situation, it doesn't apply to you and me. And from that point on, we now know that our society is not operating fairly. Our society is not operating with equality. Our society is one for the rich, one for the powerful, and one for those who have the power. And if you don't have any power, there's nothing you can do about it, because you won't be treated the same as those who do.